So, should skateboarding be in the Olympics? I, for one, really don't care. Some skaters will be more inclined to watch the games, generating ad revenue for whoever has the broadcasting rights. And a few very talented pros might end up with medals and the cash that comes with them. Yuto made almost 38 grand in Tokyo, for example. But will it really affect a kid getting yelled at by a security guard for skating some stairs in front of an office building? I think not, and that's what skateboarding is really about. In the end, skating isn't glitz and money. It's about a piece of wood with 4 wheels. But let's flip the question. Should the Olympics be in skateboarding? Well, they already are, and in a big way. Not in the sense of skate competitions already being the Olympics of the sport, or the fact that Thrasher's 2021 Skater of the Year award mattered a lot more to skaters than what happened in the Tokyo Games that same year. Like I said, we could talk concepts all day, and none of it would affect most skaters. So what do I mean about the Olympics already being in skateboarding? I'm mostly talking about spots, specifically plazas and other spots whose construction was specifically related to the Olympic Games that are now skated and enjoyed by your average skater. I'll be talking specifically about 4 cities that have hosted the Olympics. But first, let's get into a brief history of the Olympic Games. I mean, it used to be Greek, a lot of countries come together and compete, there are summer and winter versions, blah blah, you know that stuff. What you may not know is exactly what is constructed for the games. Besides the stadiums, pools, etc. for the various events, we usually get a brand new community known as the Olympic Village, where the athletes live during the games. Supposedly things really go down in these complexes, in the sense that they generally give out a ton of condoms. But after the orgies are over, the Olympic Villages remain. Given that these aren't gigantic sporting arenas and are more likely to have benches and that kind of thing, the villages are usually the best Olympic spots. In addition, you have the open spaces for crowds and areas for the press to set up, which can also end up leaving plaza spots. Now, the Olympics aren't unique in leaving huge, relatively unused spots behind after they wrap, but for the sake of simplicity, we'll solely be focusing on the games, and within that fence, only 4 of the host cities. Honorable mentions here include Atlanta, where, among other spots, the famous black blocks were built during the 1996 Summer Olympics, and Athens, which hosted the 2004 Summer Games and whose Olympic Village has a number of spots. And obviously, I haven't traveled to each stadium complex or pursued every lead on Olympic spots. So know that there are likely spots in every city that has hosted the games. First, let's talk about Montreal, which hosted the Summer Games in 1976. If you go to that Canadian city, you'll probably see a weird something in the skyline, and that would be the Montreal Tower, which stands above the main stadium for those Olympics. The fact is that even that part of the building itself is skatable, with a sort of mini ramp on the roof. However, the real spots surround the stadium. Probably the most famous spot in Montreal would be the natural transition spot known as the Big O. Well, it was built for the games, along with banks, wall rides, hubbas, stairs. The Montreal Games left behind what is probably the most notable Olympic complex in the world. Dime threw a contest here that took advantage of multiple parts of the place, and we'll put a link to the recap video in the description. The Montreal spots bring up an important point about Olympic spots. Oftentimes, they aren't built with anything but aesthetics in mind. Why are there massive concrete banks here? What the hell were people going to use them for? Why does the Big O exist? The answer is that the Olympics are a way for a country and a city to show themselves off to the world. Consider it architectural bling. Let's move on to the Summer Games that were held in Rio de Janeiro in 2016. Now, in preparation for the Olympics, the government made a long list of promises to Brazilians. New transit, new environmental protections, that sort of thing. And pretty much every promise was broken. It drives home the point that the Olympics cost a ton and oftentimes don't deliver on the goals sold to the citizens of the cities hosting. It's hard to separate that from all the amazing spots they built, but the fact is that the former Olympic Village in Rio, like a lot of Olympic-related construction, is just a heaven for skaters. From gaps to manual pads to an overdose of ledges, it's one of Brazil's best spots. You can get a look at this area in a Thrasher video filmed entirely there, which we'll link to in the description. Of course, they demolished an entire neighborhood to build the place, but that is what it is. Nothing much else to say here. Check the video. The place is pretty nuts. The third city we'll be talking about is Beijing. Although the area surrounding the Olympic Park has several spots, the main effects that the 2008 Summer Olympics had on the Chinese capital would be sort of secondary. One was the general cleanup of the city's streetscape. I couldn't find construction dates for Beijing spots, but I wouldn't be surprised if many were constructed in that era, including Beijing's most famous plaza, the Jinranje Ledges. Having visited Beijing in 2007, I can personally say that the old joke about the Chinese national bird being the construction crane wasn't that much of an exaggeration back then. Everything seemed like it was under construction. In addition, the city hosted the Winter Olympics in 2022, which I'm sure gave the city yet another facelift, and even more spots. However, the main change of interest to skaters in Beijing would be the massive expansion of its subway system. From functioning with only 3 lines in 2005, the Beijing metro system would add an insane 23 subway lines before the 2022 games. Obviously, the biggest accomplishment here is the fact that Beijingers can move around their city a lot easier, but it's great for skaters too. For one thing, the improved transit system makes the city far more accessible now than it was before the games, meaning you don't have to skate huge distances to get from spot to spot, or sit in the city's absolutely horrible traffic. However, another benefit specific to subway transit improvements is the opening of new neighborhoods for spot hunting. There are over 400 train stations in Beijing. Get off the train and skate around, you'll probably find something insane considering modern Chinese architecture. This would be hard to do with a car because, again, Beijing traffic is ridiculous. Happy hunting. And so we come to Spain. This place is high on the list of anyone's dream skate countries. The whole nation is nuts, including its far-flung islands like the Canaries and Majorca. And Madrid is an under-the-radar powerhouse. Now that last statement's kind of a head-scratcher. How could a stellar skate city in a heavily skated region like Europe be passed over coverage-wise? Well, it's because the other big city in the country may be the best skate city in the world, Barcelona. And yes, the early rumblings of the city's skate architecture revolution, which, it must be noted, continues to this day, can be found in what was built for Barcelona's 1992 Summer Olympic Games. This connection is more abstract than just spots built for the games, although many of those exist. Instead, the Olympics really started the ball rolling, and the rest of the city picked it up and ran. Supposedly, Barcelona wasn't a great place architecturally before 1992. I find that kind of hard to believe, given that Gaudí is from there, and a lot of his work is in the city, but that's the general consensus. However, there's no question that a lot changed with the city hosting the Olympics. On the showing off to the world note, Barcelona as a whole made a huge effort to make itself appealing in the run-up to the games, even if that architecture didn't make much sense. Case in point would be the Bezos bumped bar spot. What is it exactly? The city's seeming obsession with banks solidified in this era, and in addition, MOCBA, probably the most famous plaza in Barcelona, opened in 1995, but it was originally supposed to open during the Olympics 3 years earlier. In 2004, Barcelona would host a major international forum, which would result in the group of spots known simply as Forum. Add this to pre-Olympic spots like the Sants train station, and the city became a nuts place to skate, and a nice place to visit, so much so the locals totally hate tourists now. I'm from a California beach town, I feel that pain. Fuck Airbnb. Anyway, like I said, the Olympics aren't alone in leaving spots behind after an event is over, but the influence of the games can be felt all over the world. I have to add that I'm not sure if London or Tokyo got new spots after their respective games, but they were major skate cities before those events anyway. For Beijing, Rio, Barcelona, and Montreal, the Olympics have changed the skate scene forever. Because of this, even with all their issues, and there are a ton of them, the Olympics have given a lot to skateboarding. Maybe skating should be in the Olympics if only to pay off a debt. This has been The Other Map. Like the video if you got this far, subscribe if you want to see more, and also if you have suggestions for other skate related topics we could cover, let us know in the comments. Peace out.